and welcome to the latest AppLearn Podcast. My name is Andrew Barlow, and I'm delighted to welcome a very special guest today, Jason Averbook. Jason is a leading analyst and thought leader in the digital transformation space and has been for over 20 years. He's the original founder of Knowledge Infusion, which was later purchased by Perio in 2012. And he is an avid keynote speaker, speaking on most of the major circuits around the world, not least HR Tech World, where I recently met him in Amsterdam. So Jason, welcome to the AppLearn Podcast.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
So Jason, now you've started a new challenge, which is LeapGen. Tell the audience a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so LeapGen is a global consultancy advisory firm that helps organizations truly prepare, execute, and then sustain everything that they do around digital transformation of their people function. So when we talk about the concept of prepare, most organizations start their digital transformation without a strategy, without a roadmap. As they move into execution, many of them do it just implementing a piece of technology without truly thinking through what transformation means. And then the sustainment component of it is many people, quote unquote, go live with a technology without realizing that that plant needs to be continuously watered in order to sustain truly the outputs and the goals of a digital transformation. So the work that we do on a global basis is help organizations of all shapes and sizes go through how to prepare, how to execute, and how to sustain that concept of digital transformation in the world that every single organization is either going through today, or if they're not, should be going through as we speak.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, as we can see, the figures they really, really do blow my mind. I mean, we're seeing an increase, a huge increase in the speed of investment in digital transformation. But I guess from your perspective, 20 years in the industry, been through taken organizations through many transformation projects. Adoption and sustaining adoption, you mentioned there, watering the plant. Sustaining the adoption of digital transformation is difficult, right? It's a challenge for most organizations. I mean, from your perspective, roll back to some of the first implementations that you did. Do you really feel businesses did consider the importance of adoption in those early implementations of cloud HR technologies?
No, Andrew, they didn't have to. I mean, the audience for digital transformation in those early implementations were the HR people or the personnel department or the payroll department, where they had to use the technology because it was their job. And if they didn't use the technology, they're fired. So now the fact that we live in a world where the audience is completely different. It's the workforce that's having noise come at them from every possible direction. They have messages coming at them from every possible direction. They're truly looking for that precise what's in it for me and why should I interact with process and technology in this new school and this new world we live in today. So I'd say that did they focus on adoption? No. Did they have to focus on adoption? No, which is why it makes the world we live in today so much more important.
And what do you think's changed that now, Jason? From my personal perspective, we were both at HR Tech World together in Amsterdam, and I was speaking to a number of different people from various different organizations. And it seems like today adoption is at the forefront of a lot of the decisions that they make. Why do you think that that's changed now?
As I said a second ago, because if people don't adopt the technology, it's going to fail. Period. End of story. I hate to be so I don't mean to be so blunt about it, but if it doesn't get used, it's sort of like if I build this glorious app on the App Store and all of a sudden no one downloads it, or they download it and they delete it, and they don't keep updating it, the problem is that it doesn't get used, and therefore it just dies. So I could go through a massive year-long digital transformation project with the best people in the organization, changing my processes, pushing things out to people. But then if I don't focus on adoption, or really what I like to say and what we like to say at LeapJen is how do we shift from adoption to addiction? If I don't actually build the capability around my experience to tie into what gets people addicted to these tools, it will fail. And that's why it's so important.
I think that that's tremendously powerful. And I think that, certainly from what I've seen and what we see on a regular basis, adoption is something that's being focused on, but it's still very new to a lot of organizations. Having to consider how to truly impact and measure and sustain adoption over time is not something that they've done before.
So Andrew, if I could, we've flipped the whole notion of enterprise software on its head. The enterprise software that I designed early in my career was designed for practitioners. It was designed for practitioners that needed to use the technology in order to get things done. Now the flipped on its head is we're looking at it from an employee's perspective, from a manager's perspective, not from a siloed perspective of what used to make up HR. And because we're doing that, the practice of adoption it's not the same. I'm not putting up a poster saying, hey, we've got a new system coming, let's go use it. I'm fighting for eyeballs and eardrums. And as I'm fighting for those eyeballs and eardrums, I have to put out messaging that will get people to want to engage and to want to interact. And if I don't, then the adoption doesn't happen. So it's needed. It's a new day. It's a new time. The processes have to change to be focused on the workforce, not on the HR department. And therefore the adoption/addiction has to be, I don't want my HR people to use this stuff. Duh, they have to use this stuff. What I really want to do is I want to focus on how to get the workforce to engage. If the workforce engaged, the data's better, the tools are better, and I'm able to get the outcomes I'm trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think it's that want to versus have to mentality, and that's a whole separate debate. I think we've just created our next AppLearn podcast title there. There's no blueprint for it, is there? There is no, if you do all of these things, it will be successful. And I guess that's why organizations like LeapGen exist, because you are able to immerse yourselves in the organization, understanding their specific challenges, and then tackling them head on.
So, Andrew, I think that the blueprint for success is a combination of a couple things. First of all, LeapGen, the name stands for how do we leap to the next generation of work. LeapGen also, the leap component, also stands for love, energy, audacity, and proof. So how do I love what I do to generate energy, to do the audacious, and then prove value? And to me, the blueprint is that. It's how do I love what I do so much to generate energy, not just amongst myself, but with my workforce, do the audacious, like get people to interact with processes like they've never done before, and then prove it so that it's repeatable. And I think that one of the keys, I don't think there's necessarily a blueprint, but I'll tell you that there's a huge word that we use in every single adoption initiative we're involved in, and that's empathy. We have to be empathetic towards the workforce of today and all of the different things that come at them in order to get them to, quote unquote, use the processes that we're pushing out. And, I think we're approaching a day, Andrew, where we're not going to roll out technology. I think we're approaching a day where we're going to roll out processes, and they're going to be digital by nature. So therefore, we have to become really, really good at this whole concept of digital enablement, digital adoption, because everything we do going forward is going to be focused on that. And the whole concept of HR technology or workforce technology, that's going to be one of those things like, why did we ever have to add the technology component to it? Because everything we do today has technology as part of the DNA of the solution.
Definitely, and I think that plays really, really nicely into an article that I read by you recently called The Frictionless Workforce, which talks about the personalization of experiences. Could you touch a little bit on that?
So if we think about the personalization, everyone wants to feel from an empathy standpoint like you're talking to them. They don't want to get a blank message that maybe appears, maybe it doesn't appear. It's like billboards to me. Like you put up billboards and the chance of someone happening to see a billboard that hits them and makes an impact is sometimes it's a 1 in a million chance. What we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that the right product, whether that be a transaction, whether that be a piece of content, whether that be a video, whether that be an image, whatever it is, hits the right people from a personalization standpoint at the right moment. So when I care about it, and I'll break this down into an HR context in a second, but then through the right channel as well. So is it mobile? Is it SMS text? Can I go to a tattoo parlor and get something tattooed on me? Whatever that right channel, quote unquote, is. But if we think about right product, so let's say I'm enrolling in benefits or I'm taking part in a yearly process. I want to get the right product, which is a combination of information about that process combined with the transaction to the right people. Only the people that should be interacting should get the information, not everyone. So we have 90% of the workforce confused, like, do I have to do this? Do I don't have to do this? It should be to the right people through the right quote-unquote model of how am I delivering it, which is, at the right moment, like it hits them right when they're looking for it and when they need it, and then through the quote-unquote right channel, which is my device. And it's probably a notification that pops up on the phone saying, hey, it's time to do this, let's do it. I'm not navigating through dumb intranet portals and link farms and all that crap. It's popping up, I click on it, and I'm there, and I'm done, and I'm gone. I don't want to keep these people forever. I just want them to take part in my process and go back to their daily life. So the concept of frictionless is basically meaning I'm not adding steps to their life. I'm delivering information to them where they are so they can take action on it and move on.
Yeah, it's so true. We speak to customers on a regular basis, and listening to the competition for mindshare and the fact that if you're going to interrupt me from what I'm doing at that moment in time, then I'm going to become frustrated. So,
well, if you're going to interrupt me, if you're going to interrupt me like I just interrupted you. If I'm going to interrupt you, then I need to say, okay, I'm going to train you. And if I'm going to train you, then I'm going to train you how to use these systems. Like, that's not what I want to do. I wanted this to be part of the natural experience of work. I want this to be part of the natural experience of work. So as someone's doing their work and they need to do something, they do it, and then move on versus, hey, this is training. Now watch this dumb video as to how to do this type thing. Like, it should be natural. And I think natural is a really key word. It should be natural as to how does this feel when I'm creating an experience. And I say this over and over to audiences all over the world that an experience is not a transaction. A transaction is one part of an experience. So to me, transaction plus interaction equals experience. But just the transaction itself, you're never going to finish a transaction and say, oh, that felt so good. I just need a cigarette. That's never going to happen. It needs to be the combination of the transaction plus value-added interaction that makes you have an experience that says, wow, that was awesome. Now back to my daily programming.
Yeah, I think it's obviously you're a thought leader. You have been in the space for a number of years,
decades, generations.
Decades. You're showing your age, Jason.
Yes.
No, speaking at major events and what have you. How do you translate that thinking into helping enterprises around the world? Because the stats don't lie. Forbes have said that 75% of digital transformation projects fail to deliver their intended return on investment. And I guess it's that sort of teaching people to fish mentality rather than giving them a fish. How can we help people, organizations that are embarking on these types of programs think differently, but also arm them with the tools that they need to be successful? Is it, a methodology? Is it a different way of thinking? What is it that organizations really need to do to ensure that any money that they spend on digitally transforming their organizations is money well spent?
To me, Andrew, and this is where our services come into play with organizations, is it starts with the vision. And getting people to understand what is the vision of what are they trying to do here is so key. And that vision needs to be aligned from the top of the organization to the bottom of the organization and across the organization. If you don't have alignment, you've got people going in with different expectations and different ideas as to what this thing of digital transformation is, big T, little t, whatever you want to do. And when you do that, it's very hard to hit a target when you're spraying and praying towards lots of different expectations. So the first thing is, what's the vision? What's the vision as to how work gets done? What's the vision as to how we're going to interact with our workforce? Do we want high-touch digital? Do we want high-touch human? What do we want from an experience standpoint? Once I've got that vision, then everything else starts to fall into play, where I'm like, okay, if I'm making a process decision, I go back to my vision. If I'm making a technology decision, I go back to my vision. If I go back to a people decision, as far as who's interacting with these processes, I go back to my vision. So that vision is so, so crucial. But really, Andrew, to answer your question is, one of the reasons that I love what we do so much is it's teaching. It is a different world now, and it requires a different mindset. And what we're doing is we're taking people that have been doing the same thing for 30 years, just switching the technology from mainframe to DOS to Windows to client server to web to phone to blah, 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 blah. And all of a sudden saying, guys, this is not the same game. This isn't just a technology upgrade. This is an audience change. This is a way we work change. The consumerization aspect of it has changed everything. So this isn't your normal every 5-year technology update. This is a change in how work gets done and what people expect from how they interact with tools.
As I say, we see that quite regularly with various different customers that have treated modern transformation deployments the same way that they used to treat on-premise deployments years ago. And they've come unstuck as a result of that because, it's not the same, as you say. There's a lot of different components, not least the fact that, cloud technologies will change much more readily than they did, than on-premise solutions did years before.
Andrew, I don't know what unstuck means to you. I might say unglued or messed up or something like that. But, if they approach these the same way, all they're going to get is the same thing that they had before in a new piece of technology. And when they do that, it hurts their credibility. It hurts their ability to get any long-term budget. And basically what ends up happening is the thing that they just spent all this time doing dies. So, if you don't change that, and if you get, if you mess up and but do the same thing you've always done, only with this new technology, where you're going to find, I did this survey at HR Tech World in Amsterdam. Out of the 800 people there, 60% of them had already moved to the cloud. But of those 60%, 57% basically said, or 97%, of the 60% basically said it didn't meet our expectations. And the reason it didn't meet their expectations is that it's not that the technology didn't meet their expectations. It's that they didn't reframe and create that vision as to what they were going to do with it and why they were doing it to begin with.
Yeah, no, that's an incredible statistic, and it does point to a growing problem, and that's what that's the whole point of this podcast really is to discuss this and discuss why organisations are struggling. One point I do want to touch on, you just mentioned their budget. It comes back to, time and time again we speak to organisations about budget. And one of the things that we believe that they're not investing in is the change component of a project. We've spoken to a number of different change leads that have gone through digital transformation projects and said that it's just not, the budget that they were given was not fit for purpose and so on. But I think, it's really about understanding, or helping businesses understand what they should be budgeting for change management. What does it require to deploy a technology and have it harmoniously adopted across an organization? And I don't think we have the data to prove or disprove that at the moment. I don't know whether you would agree with that.
Yeah, most organizations do this all wrong. So, when it comes to a business case and building in a budget, which, we help organizations with all the time, you're not doing change management to implement a piece of technology, Andrew. You're changing the delivery mechanism as to how communication happens in an organization. End of story. HR and workforce technology is the new intravenous into organizations' bloodstreams as to how I deliver culture messages, engagement messages, diversity messages, whatever it is. Yeah. And these tools that we're deploying today do that. So I don't put in a line item for change management to roll out my new technology. Of course, people are going to say, "Oh, yeah, that's the easiest thing to cut. We don't need that. Our people are used to change. Blah 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 blah." what we're doing is we're saying we're introducing a new this intravenous into the workforce, and this is how all of our communications is going to flow. So if you don't give this budget, you basically have no way to deliver people services. Period. Recruiting, talent management, engagement, culture, learning. If you don't invest in how you're going to put this intravenous into the workforce, into the veins of the workforce, going forward, you're going to have no way to communicate to the workforce because email's dying, email's overused. All these tools the workforce doesn't pay any attention to. So we have to change the conversation from not a budget to implement a piece of technology, but we're putting in place and investing in how we communicate with the workforce of the future. And when we do that, our message is completely different.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct there. I think that's the sort of recurring theme that comes back through a lot of our customers, especially about ineffective communication channels inside organisations. But and that in turn relates back to wanting to be communicated in the way that I like to be communicated to.
Well,
but
and Andrew, one of the reasons that I get beat up at HR tech conferences over and over again is because, I think the equation for success of any digital transformation is about 45% people, 45% process, 10% technology. So who's actually involved in the work, who we're actually imposing the work upon, what the work is, and the technology is just how it gets done. But we don't spend any time on the 90%. And in most organizations, these projects are still run by IT, who are trying to push change management as a way to train people on using the technology versus training them on this new way of working and a new way of interacting with processes. And I think those two, that chasm is mega. And, once again, IT is desperately needed in these projects, but because 90% of my success is not the technology, it's the people that are in the workforce, and it's the processes that I push out to the workforce and whether people will accept them or not. I need to change that whole framing of, don't do change management around technology only. Do change management around these new capabilities we're giving to the workforce.
Yeah. I find it incredible how you broke that down then into what you perceive the different percentages to be. I think that's something that I'm particularly interested in, mainly because I think that if you ask that same question to different people, you'll get a different answer. As you say, if you ask that question to a technical lead or an IT lead, I'm sure the percentage for the technology will be a lot higher. And it's those different perceptions that are confusing for organisations. But I'm with you. I'm on the Jason Averbook side of the fence, which is that it's 90% about changes to behaviours and processes, and 10% about the technology that underpins it.
And Andrew, I'm dying to jump through this microphone and jump across the pond, even though actually I have to jump across a bunch of land and then the pond.
It's a long way.
It is a long way, you're right. But I think that IT people, that group that you mentioned, I think that they're starving. I truly think they're starving for the HR organization in this case to create that vision and to create that ownership of the people and process pieces of it. I think that what ends up happening is they buy a piece of technology. All of a sudden, systems integrators get involved. They have to meet a date. They have to go live, et cetera, et cetera. And then the only thing that technology people can do is follow the project plan and get them live. I think they're starving. None of these IT people, which deserve all the credit in the world, want these things to fail. But at the same time, if the HR constituents and the business constituents don't know that they have to get engaged and don't actually take ownership of it, what's IT going to do except meet their date, go live, and get the grade of a D? And the grade of a D has nothing to do with their work. The grade of a D is that they didn't spend any time on the people and process stuff.
Yeah, but I can understand why it's confusing for customers. I really can. If you look at some of the messaging that customers, are often given, maybe from a vendor, for example, about how intuitive their technologies are and the lack of a need for training. You don't need training; people will just adopt it. Those types of messages, I'm not convinced that they do a lot of good, because as you said, 90% of the problem is not linked to that technology. And don't get me wrong, I think that the vendors are doing an incredible job of their UIs and their interfaces. I really do. But I think it's easy to get sort of sucked down that hole of this software's intuitivity is going to solve all of my problems for me.
Yeah, and Andrew, the vendors deserve all the credit in the world. And A+ vendors, great job. You got a great user interface. But that's not the game. I mean, that's what the vendors control. It's the enterprise's responsibility to take that great user interface and turn it into an experience. It's not the vendor's job. So, however we can push that message across, you and I as religious heroes here trying to get the message out, like really, really important, because A+ vendors, you got it. You're mobile, it looks cool, it's quote unquote easy to use. No, that's not the issue. The issue is, why are people interacting with these processes? What are the capabilities it's giving them? And what are the outcomes that they're going to achieve by interacting with these processes? That is not the vendor's job, and that is what's going to drive adoption. Like, period, end of story.
Yeah, I recently ran a workshop for one of the world's largest hotel groups, and they'd implemented a new ATS. And what we did is, they had some adoption challenges, and what we did is we looked at what the problems were, and we mapped them against a matrix that we have here at AppLearn, which covers culture, strategy, process, skills, behaviors, and technology. And it was really interesting to see how many of their adoption problems were not linked to tech. A lot of them were linked to, people not wanting to change behaviors, or, a cultural change where you're now asking people to do something that they didn't have to do before, and so on. So, it's not just something that we believe. I think it's something also that, customers are actually experiencing right now as they're embarking on these specific projects.
Yeah, and Andrew, I mean, just a teaser to, one of my big personal trends for 2018, is we're going to stop talking about technology. We're going to start talking about capabilities. The reason that HR people get scared and why the IT groups get so involved is because it always comes back to the technology. It's like, the word technology is involved, we need to get IT involved, and they end up driving the project. If we think about how are we rolling out new capabilities, and we're partnering with IT on those capabilities that need some IT assistance, that all of a sudden puts HR in the driver's seat to maneuver here, versus the minute it becomes a technology project, HR says, "Oh, not me. Nope, I'm tapping. I'll give you my requirements, but send it back to me when it's done." And I just think that's horse manure. Like, I think it's truly one of those things where we have to say, we are now rolling out capabilities as an HR function that are digital. Forget the technology. They're digital capabilities because we live in a digital world. I think that's a song. Oh, no, it's probably not a song. But it could be. We living in a no, that's a different song.
I think.
But yeah, it could be
Madonna.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, living in a digital world. Is that a song?
We'll play that out at the end. That'll be the end song as we roll out of the podcast. I promise.
Yeah. So we're living in this digital world, and it's HR's job to embrace the digital world, not give it to IT to tie it just to technology.
No, I think that's an incredible point. I want to move forward now to a question that I guess should be big on most people's agenda for 2018, and that's data and demonstrating return on investment through data. One of the trends that we've seen this year is more organizations are interested in adoption-related data, and we invest a lot of money in our analytics capabilities so that we can help organizations understand, where are the challenges in the organization, what areas of the system or what processes are people pushing back on. From your perspective, how do you start to see this unfolding? I know you've mentioned, that you see people talking very differently about technology projects, but also, from your perspective, what role has data got to play in terms of adoption?
So I think it plays a key role, and I think there's 3 different phases of it. from a maturity standpoint, where we are today. The first phase of it is just basically standard adoption measures, which is looking at who signed in, how many times did they do it via mobile device, what times did they do it, et cetera, et cetera. That's standard stuff. That's kind of like me as HR looking at myself in the mirror saying, hey, did I get people to click on the link? Did they sign in? There's the second component of it, which is really saying, while they were signed in, what did they do? What was their success ratio in being able to complete what the capability was trying to get them to do? So did they complete it? How long did it take them? Did they give us a smiley face at the end? Was there abandonment? And if so, where was the abandonment? I think that's the second level of analytics around the data that adoption measures can give us. And then the third one is really gets into this whole model of prescription to me. And that's, instead of abandonment and then all of a sudden going to a call center, or abandonment and having someone all of a sudden say, hey, I give up, I actually want to prescribe to them what to do to help them through the process as they're going through it. So abandonment is the easiest answer for all of this stuff for the employee. They're like, oh, well, that was a great try by HR, but still doesn't work. We're going to call. Or great try by HR, but still takes too much time. Can't figure out how to sign in, so we're going to call. So we spend all this money on this digital stuff, yet people abandon, and they end up calling, and we don't really understand and don't take the time to understand why. So, for me, doing a cross-reference between the type of worker or the persona combined with why are they abandoning? Why are they not completing what they're completing? Or why are they completing what they're completing? And then a prescriptive as to what's next. How do I get out of a situation that I can't complete a process? Or how do I, now that I did, how do I recommend it to others so that I continue to get noise and build that addiction component to it? I think is going to be key. So, data is key, but how we push the data to the different audiences is even more key. So as a business leader, I don't care if people sign into Salesforce. Like, cool. If they don't put the data in or they get stuck, it doesn't matter to me whether they sign in or not. I want that data expressed to me in a way where I can actually realize that this tool is providing value and I want to keep investing in it. So a lot of work to be done in this area, which is why I love what AppLearn's doing from an analytics standpoint to not just give the function the ability to look at themselves in the mirror, but to truly understand where things are breaking down and how to fix them.
Yeah, and I guess it comes back to the what you said right at the beginning of the podcast, which was that people need to understand that they have to water it in order for it to sustain and grow over time, and I think that this is just a necessary evil. There will be an optimization process post go live, and we've already seen statistics coming out that show organizations investing in optimization post go live. I would say that if we get to abandonment, once we get to that point of abandonment, I think we've lost them. We've already gone too far. We've already cost the business money. I was recently in Chicago and I was speaking to a customer, and they get around 2,500 tickets a month for a well-known HCM tool. And they believe that each of those tickets cost them $100 US. So they're spending the best part of $250,000 US a month just responding to support tickets about their new HCM platform. I think that just doesn't work. That breaks the whole model of cloud technology is more efficient than doing things in a different way.
And I'm going to guess, just from the work that we do with organizations, that 90% of those are not about the technology.
100%.
Correct. 100% of the 90%. No, just kidding. But it's mostly about the fact that they don't understand why they're doing it, or they have all I did is put out the bare naked transaction, and I didn't surround it with other kinds of data or knowledge to help me understand what it was, why I was doing what I was doing. And that's where people get lost. It's not that, like, I know you weren't doing this, but when people blame it on the technology, it just drives me bat crazy because the technology is dumb. Like, it's totally dumb, and it's getting smarter over time, and it will continue to get smarter over time. But as far as, like, helping people understand why they're participating in a process and what the value is of that, a piece of HR technology is not going to do that anytime soon.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because 85% of those tickets were raised by managers, which is an interesting, interesting consideration.
Who, by the way, we pay a boatload of money. We pay a boatload of money to manage and lead and develop a culture and our people. We don't pay them a boatload of money to play with dumb tools. So, as we think about a lot of work we do is how do we deliver services to the workforce of the future? And that's why that frictionless is so key, Andrew, because the minute that 85% of those managers get distracted by these tools, I mean, it's just like I always say, like if you download an app, you don't like it, how often do you go back to see if it got better? You don't. If I roll something out the first time, it fails, how often do you go back to see if it got better? You don't. So, like, you have one chance. It's another song, I think, by Eminem. And if you don't actually take advantage of that one chance, now you have two songs to play out. If you don't actually take advantage of that, that's probably too explicit, though. If you don't actually take advantage of that one chance, you're going to look for your next gen and do this all over again. So, like, I tell people that aren't at the cloud yet, stop. Like, don't try to get to where everyone else is because most people that got to the cloud are not happy. Like, leapfrog and get to the digital pioneer phase.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting consideration actually that organizations can leapfrog because they can learn from unfortunately some of the failed projects that have gone before them. I think that organizations have done that themselves as well though. I've spoken to some customers who may have rolled out, a new HCM platform in, 2008, 2009, probably their first cloud implementation ever, and it didn't go well, but they learned from it and the next one went better. And so did the next one. And, I guess it's the same with many things, many transformation projects internally. You're going to learn from your mistakes. But I do think that organizations, as you say, they'll have an opportunity to learn from where other businesses failed. And I think that might be one of the reasons why organizations are so keen to hear about the stories and learn from other customers who've implemented various different tools as well. What went well, what could have gone better, and what didn't go so good.
Yeah, but Andrew, yes, I completely agree. And as you know, we are in early days of the science of what's going to drive adoption and what's going to drive workforce sort of addiction to these tools, which is why it's so exciting. I mean, well, scary and exciting, but it's early. I mean, you can't find a ton of success out there. You can find little pockets of success, but most people will say, whoa, we didn't do that right. And the reason that they didn't do it right is because they basically did the same thing they did in the past.
Yeah, and it depends on the project who you ask because, I speak to a lot of technical, organization people that support, the tech part of an organization that's implementing a technology, and more often than not, they feel that the project was a success, and that's because it was configured the way they wanted it configured. It was done on time. It was done on budget. So as far as they're concerned, it went well.
I'm going to take you to
the stakeholders.
Yep, I'm going to take you back to
a different answer.
I'm going to take you back to the vision. The vision has measurements. What's our measure of success? In most technology cases, it's go live. When it's go live, then of course it's going to be a success because almost all go live.
Is it giving me the efficiency gains and the return on investment that was promised through my vision and through the business case? And that's why I think that you have to go back and ask the stakeholders that have committed the budget to this transformation to see whether they think it's been a success or not.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, so
whenever you pause like that, I don't know what you're going to say. Are you going to ask me some personal question now, or are you just trying to think about which way to take this crazy dialogue?
Okay, so finally, Jason, from you, I mean, what advice would you give to organizations, project teams that are embarking on a new digital transformation project?
Yeah, so there's really three pieces of advice. The first piece of advice is all around that equation of success I quoted earlier, which is 45% people, 45% process, 10% technology. And make sure that you structure your project and your program in a way that reflects that equation for success. The second is realizing that this is an ongoing, perpetual beta, new way of thinking. It's a DNA model that I'm inserting into an organization that says we are going to roll out digital capabilities, period. And we're going to constantly innovate. We're going to put in place the governance, the bad G word, to make sure that we all are on the same page and realize that employees don't care about the silos we've built HR in. They care about one view into how they get things done. So that second thing is, how do I realize this is the DNA of the company today, and it's an ongoing perpetual beta. And the third thing that I'd say is probably most important to me is go live equals go begin. So when you're live, that's actually when the fun starts. I mean, that's when you should start measuring value. That's when you should start to say, hey, we need to get new people involved. We need to get new ideas going. We need to have additional capabilities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Go live doesn't mean, whew, thank God I gained 30 pounds, I got divorced, I started smoking. Now I can go back to my normal life because we're live and we're going to let this thing die. Go live needs to equal go begin when I really start to turn up the volume and step on the gas and say, guys, we have a Ferrari here. I'm not sure if that's the right car to use as my analogy for you, Andrew, because I know you and your family are car guys, but whatever the car is, we've got this amazing car that we're going to start moving with, and I need to make sure that I'm leveraging it to drive where I'm trying to take my organization. So the third thing, go live equals go begin.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that. I do appreciate it. Appreciate your time with us today. Now I want to go to the quickfire round, a little bit of fun, Jason. I've got some questions for you. I'm just going to shoot them straight at you. Question number one, what have you got in your pocket right now? Is it an M&M CD?
No, it's not. But it basically is something that allows me to listen to my M&M CD. By the way, we're getting old if you're talking about CDs still, my friend. I have my Apple AirPods, which are probably one of the best investments I've ever had made in my life. So, I listen to M&M as I'm running. So, it's basically, I kind of have M&M in my pocket.
Yeah, well, I guess that speaks to how we all like to receive information, right?
Exactly.
If you've got your phone, because I've got my phone in my pocket as well. Okay, no problem. If you could look back, you could go back in time and speak to yourself when you were right at the beginning of your career. What would you say to yourself?
I think I would say to myself that I would have pushed harder on getting people to think different about these new technologies along the way, instead of now waiting for this time. So, as someone who's old, going from mainframe to DOS to Windows to client server to web, I've watched it, and I've watched it all happen, where all we've done is we've moved people from place to place to place to place, or tech to tech to tech to tech. What we haven't done is I haven't pushed the change enough. So now it's an avalanche. It's not a tempered thing. It's an avalanche that's hitting us, and it's cost organizations billions and billions and billions of dollars. And I don't take that all on my account, but Y2K, I have to put these tech in, and I'm not going to worry about anything except going live for Y2K. Oh, clients or web, have to get to the web. Okay, I'm just going to take a screen scrape of everything I have and put it on the web. Like, none of those were the right way to do things. So, in retrospect, looking backwards, I'd say, how do you push people? How do you inspire people in a way to make change and not accept the fact that they're just going to spin their wheels forever?
And if you could spend a night on a desert island with anybody, which two people would you take with you?
I would take the people that make me look best in my life, which would be the two people that run marketing for LeapGen, Kristen Penny and Leah Tanner. They're the two that make us look so good from a company standpoint. So those are the two people I would spend my evening on a deserted island with. Just don't tell my wife.
Yeah, this is only going to go out on LinkedIn to many thousands of people. I'm sure she'll never know.
Hold on. We're talking from a business sense. If I had to, from a personal standpoint, I'd probably say my two boys, who are 13 and 10, Ben and Alex.
Oh, so that's really nice. And what would you perceive as to be the greatest invention ever?
Oh, that's such a brilliant question. I was thinking about this just this weekend, actually, oddly enough. So I think that anyone that says that the internet, which has so many different flavors, is not the greatest invention ever, I guess you could go back to electricity if you really wanted to and say without electricity you couldn't have the internet. But in our time, there's not a greater invention than the internet, because what it allows us to do, like record this podcast or shop or get our nails done, or whatever it is, basically all stuff I did this weekend. It's a different way of living. It's changed the whole world, and it's set up the next generation in a way that's completely different than it is today. So, my son did his homework last night on a new keyboard I bought him online that was delivered in 2 hours, from Amazon. That would have never happened if the internet wasn't there. So, I don't see how anyone cannot. I don't even see how that's a question, with the exception of if I go way back in time and say electricity.
Well, I'll have to come over to LA and ask you the question again, and you can. But next time, maybe with a beer in our hands. Okay, and finally, last question, and then I'll thank you for your time.
Hey, Andrew.
Yeah.
I don't know. People in LA, just for the record, when people like you come into LA with that accent, it's like you're like a chick magnet. So just to warn you that people love that accent. If I could only have that accent, whew.
The British accent. Yeah, until they call me Australian, which is which has happened far too many times. Oh my God, are you Australian? Like, no, I'm from England. Final question: who's had the biggest influence on your career?
So I had this crazy guy that believed in me when I was 17 years old, named Dino Hernandez, who's no longer alive, but I was working for a hotel company, interestingly. Like you said, you were working with a hotel company. And he trusted in me to move from Minneapolis, Minnesota, as a 17-year-old kid to South Florida to open up a brand new hotel. When he's, the number of times I said, there's no way I can do this, I have no experience. And he said, the best experience is just doing it. That I live with that basically tattooed on me every day. The best experience is just doing it. So trying new things every day, realizing that the best way to learn is to fail. And the only way to continue to grow is to push yourself to new experiences. That by far is the person that's had the biggest impact on my life.
That's amazing. Well, I think that all that's left to do is thank you for your time, Jason. It's been incredible having you on here. I've followed your career for many years since I first met you in Las Vegas, 5-6 years ago now. Long may the thought leadership continue. It's good to push the boundaries of what digital can do for organizations, but also not forgetting the fact that this is about people. I think that's certainly something that comes across when you speak so eloquently and passionately about this industry and the associated topics. So thank you for your time, Jason. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, and Andrew, it's also, it's about people and it's about fun. Like, this is fun shit. Like, we have this amazing opportunity to change the world, and the time is right to do that. And the more fun you have doing it, and you don't think of it as a job, but you think of it as truly, right there, changing the way that the world works, and you wake up every single day with that, it's amazing. It's an amazing time. So, thank you for the compliments. And just one more tip when you come to the U.S., never tell someone you met them in Las Vegas. It's not necessarily an endearing thing long term.
We were at a conference. I will.
Yeah.
We were at a conference. Okay. Well, thank you for your time, Jason. I appreciate it. Thank you for listening to today's podcast. As always, you can find all of the podcasts that we create here at AppLearn across our various different social channels and also on applearn.com. Please feel free to share and distribute the podcast, and any feedback will be more than welcome. If you would like to participate in a future AppLearn podcast, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn.